Her true story, from New York. He said, "You're lucky we even let you stay." So I quietly left, then sold the land their house stood on. No one heard me pack, but they all heard the bulldozers. The silverware clinked against porcelain like brittle bones. No one spoke. The roast chicken was perfectly seasoned, the mashed potatoes creamy and hot, not that anyone seemed to notice. Angela's diamond earrings swung as she leaned across the table, setting her wineglass down with a sharp clink. "You know," she began, her voice sugar-coated with contempt, "if Mom's still living here when the Hendersons visit next weekend, it'll be embarrassing. They're from Westchester, Jason. They host dinners with wine pairings and guest lists." She turned her eyes to me, those cold, sharp eyes. I had once sewn the hem of her wedding dress by hand. I had welcomed her into my home like a daughter. Now, I was a liability. "If Mother's still here, it'll make us look small," she said, slowly, as though I couldn't understand. Jason didn't even look up from his phone. His fork moved absently over his plate. Angela continued, "I mean, let's call it what it is. She doesn't pay rent, she doesn't help with utilities, the garden she keeps is half dead, and she takes up space that could be our sunroom. Honestly," she looked straight at me now, "if you're a freeloader, maybe it's time to consider assisted living. Let the state take care of you, that's what it's there for." I didn't move. My hands were folded neatly in my lap. "And frankly," she added, voice louder now, "you should be grateful we even let you stay here. Most people wouldn't. We've been more than generous." Jason finally glanced up, just briefly. "Yeah, Mom, Angela's right. I mean, most people your age are in homes. It's not like you're contributing." His voice didn't even carry anger, just indifference. That was worse. My son. My only son. I looked at the space around me. The table I had stained myself. The cabinet with the crack from when Jason was 3 and knocked it over with his toy truck. The curtain I had embroidered while waiting for a phone call that never came. Every inch of this house, and the land beneath it, held pieces of me. And yet, at that moment, I wasn't even a person to them. I was a burden. A dead weight. An inconvenience wrapped in graying hair and worn sweaters. Angela stood up to clear her plate, heels clacking against the floor. "I'll call a contractor tomorrow," she said over her shoulder. "We'll start the guest house on Monday. We'll need the garden cleared." That was my garden. The last space in this place that still belonged to me, in spirit, if not in their eyes. Jason shrugged. "Guess you'll need to move your stuff, Mom. They'll need access to the backyard." I stood, slowly. My joints protested, but I didn't let it show. I looked at Jason. Truly looked. He had his father's eyes, but none of his fire. I had raised that boy with hands that bled through winters, with feet that stood at hospital beds, and arms that carried his future on my back. I gave him everything. I gave him this land. But that night, he gave me silence. That silence screamed louder than any insult. I walked back to my cottage behind their house. It was a small place. 2 rooms, a kitchenette, a garden outside. I had planted rosemary, tomatoes, basil, and a line of marigolds by the back fence. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I sat at my little table, pulled open the drawer, and removed a brown envelope. Inside were the original deeds to the land, my name written clearly on every page. I had given Jason the right to build on it, to live on it, but I had never signed over ownership. They never asked, they assumed. I placed the deed on the table alongside a folded map of the property. The boundary lines were clear. My cottage, the garden, the main house, all on my land. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They thought silence meant surrender. I looked out the window at the backyard. The lights from Jason's house cast long shadows over the grass. I could hear music now. Angela probably setting up speakers for next weekend's important guests. I imagined my little house, gone, replaced by a sleek guest cottage with white stone and a private bar. I imagined them showing guests around, bragging about the pool, the view, the open layout. All of it built on bones they forgot they stood on. My bones. That night, I didn't sleep. I lit a single candle, watched it burn down to the wick, and thought of my husband. He had died before he could see Jason grow into the man he was now. Maybe that was a mercy. In the morning, before dawn broke, I opened my closet and pulled out my old suitcase. The zipper stuck, as always. I packed only what I needed: clothes, a small jewelry box, a framed photo of Jason as a boy, and the deed. I didn't cry. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to say. I stepped outside. The air was cool, still heavy with night. The garden glistened with dew. I knelt, touched the soil one last time, and whispered, "Thank you." Then I turned, locked the cottage door behind me, and walked away. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I finally remembered this land was mine. And they had forgotten, but I hadn't, not anymore. It wasn't always like this. When my husband passed away, the silence in our apartment became unbearable. Every corner reminded me of him, his slippers by the door, the chipped mug he always used for morning coffee, the chair he refused to replace even when the springs gave out. I spent 6 months walking from room to room, not speaking to anyone, just listening for footsteps that would never return. One day, I opened the windows, let the sunlight flood in, and realized I needed to leave before the grief swallowed me whole. I sold the apartment. It wasn't worth much, a modest 1-bedroom in Queens, but it gave me enough to purchase a small piece of land upstate. The air was cleaner, the noise softer. I thought it would be my place of rest, the chapter where I'd learned to breathe again. Jason was struggling at the time. He had just lost his job at the print shop and was bouncing between couch surfing and applying to warehouse gigs. When I told him I was moving, he looked at me with pleading eyes I'd known since he was a boy. "Mom, could I come with you, just until I get back on my feet?" Of course, I said yes. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't? I used my savings to clear the land and drew up plans for a small house for myself. 2 rooms, enough for 1 person. The rest of the property I told Jason he could build on if he found work and wanted to settle. He hugged me so tight that day, I thought my ribs would crack. "I'll never forget this," he whispered. He forgot. Back then, Angela wasn't in the picture yet. It was just Jason and I. We planted the first rosemary bush together. I taught him how to fertilize the soil, how to turn compost, how to trim tomatoes without bruising them. He seemed happy. He worked construction jobs for a while, saved up, and eventually built a modest 2-bedroom on the land. I was proud. I thought maybe this land would hold our family together. Then Angela arrived. She was pretty, charming, and always polite in front of Jason, but the moment he wasn't around, her voice changed. Colder, sharper. "Could you not hang laundry out front? It makes the place look poor. I cleaned the kitchen this morning. Please don't bake again today, it leaves a smell. Your little garden is fine, I guess, but the HOA is very particular about appearances." HOA. We didn't even have one, but Angela acted like we did, as if we lived in some gated community instead of a shared patch of earth. She started redecorating everything, took over the outdoor space, put a fire pit near the edge of my garden without asking, told guests they had converted the back into a guest space, referring to my cottage. She even started using my kitchen during parties, like it was an extension of their home. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Newlyweds, young people trying to figure out their roles. I cooked for them, watched their dog when they traveled, watered their houseplants. Then one afternoon, I heard her on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was returning her mixing bowl. She's just there. Always. Like a silent little housemaid. I mean, I guess it's convenient, right? Free help. Free help. I didn't return the bowl. I left it by her back door and walked home, my chest burning. From that point on, things shifted. I noticed how rarely Jason visited my cottage, how he stopped joining me in the garden, how he stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Ma. Angela took control of their household, and soon mine too. She decided when I could host guests, if I could. She scheduled loud construction projects without warning. Once she even had my marigolds removed, by accident, when a landscaping crew came. I kept my head down. It's what I knew how to do. I tended to my garden, fed the birds, and lit a candle every Sunday for my husband. But the boundaries, once so clearly defined, began to dissolve. My home was becoming a shed in their backyard. My identity, just a helpful old woman who didn't know when to leave. I had given them space. I had given them peace. And they had slowly erased me. By the second summer after Jason and Angela moved in, the parties had become a weekly occurrence. There were themed brunches, evening cocktail hours, backyard movie nights, and barbecues where the laughter was loud enough to rattle the glass in my kitchen window. It wasn't the noise that hurt me, it was the erasure. During those parties, Angela made it a point to steer guests away from the back of the property. My cottage, modest and clean as it was, didn't fit her image of tasteful hosting. She would block off the path that led to my door with tall drink tables or stacks of party chairs. "Keep everything in the front yard," I heard her say once. "There's no reason anyone needs to see back there, back there." That's what I had become. A direction, an inconvenience. Jason didn't say much during these events. He'd stand by the grill, beer in hand, smiling in that distracted way people do when they're floating through a life they barely recognize anymore. He had grown quieter with me. Where once he would drop by for garden herbs or sit at my table for tea, now he barely knocked. Angela handled everything now. One afternoon, as I watered my lettuce rows, Angela stormed outside in a flowing cream sundress, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Mother," she snapped, voice laced with tension, "could you not do that today?" I looked at the hose in my hand, confused. "We have people coming over," she explained, gesturing to the yard. The wet soil, the smell of compost. It's not really the vibe. I wanted to laugh. Compost had fed this earth better than any of her hors d'oeuvres ever would. But I didn't laugh. I simply turned off the hose and nodded. "Thanks," she said, turning on her heel. A week later, I noticed orange stakes in the ground, small plastic markers poking through the soil of my garden. I approached Jason as he carried lumber from the driveway. "What are those for?" I asked. "Oh, that," he said, brushing dust off his hands. "Angela's working with a contractor. We're building a guest house, right here in the back. For hosting, maybe even Airbnb. It'll raise the property value." I blinked. "But this is my garden," Jason sighed. "I know, but you've had it for years, Ma. Come on. You've had a good run. We need the space." I felt the blood drain from my face. He looked at me, not cruelly, just dismissively, like I was part of the landscape that needed trimming. "Angela says it's an eyesore. And it kind of is, Mom. It's not, it's not modern." That night, I stood by my window and stared at the stakes. They dotted the earth like tiny flags of conquest. Thought about pulling them up, just yanking them out and throwing them in the trash. But I knew that wouldn't stop anything. Not really. So I waited. I listened. And one morning, the words I'd feared finally came. I was in my kitchen pouring tea when I heard Angela outside, talking to a friend on speakerphone. "Yes," she said, voice bubbling with excitement. "Contractor comes Tuesday. We're starting with the foundation." No, it won't be in the way. We're clearing all that garden, trees, everything. Sometime next week." Another pause, then laughter. "Yep, even the little granny hut. Sometime next month, that thing's coming down. We'll finally have a clean backyard. No more eyesores." Granny hut. I stood frozen, teacup trembling in my hand. They weren't just expanding, they were erasing me. I leaned closer to the window. Angela continued, "Jason's talking to the county about permits, but honestly, it's our land, our house. The old lady's just lingering. Sometime soon we'll be done with that too. Done with me." It wasn't just about the garden or the cottage. It was about making sure I no longer existed in their world. That afternoon, Jason came by, a rare visit. He didn't sit, just hovered awkwardly by the door. "Hey, Ma," he said, "Angela and I were talking. Maybe it's time to start thinking about the next chapter." "The next chapter," I echoed. "Yeah, you know. Retirement communities, assisted living, that sort of thing. There's some good ones in the area. We'd help cover it, of course." He said it like he was offering me a gift. A place to die, neatly tucked away, where no party guests would have to see me age. I didn't respond. Not then. Instead, I thanked him, said I'd think about it, and that night I sat at my kitchen table with the deed in my hands. I ran my fingers over the paper. My name, still mine. They had built their lives on my generosity, and now they wanted to bulldoze me into the past. They thought I wouldn't do anything. They thought I'd stay quiet. They didn't know I'd already begun the next chapter, but not the one they expected. It was a Sunday morning when I decided to speak up. The sun was warm on my face, and I had just finished trimming the basil. I placed a small bouquet of herbs in a mason jar and carried it to the main house, knocking gently on the back door. Angela opened it, her lips pursed, eyes already scanning the jar like it might drip soil on her tile. "Good morning," I said. "Is Jason home?" "He's upstairs," she replied flatly, stepping aside just enough to let me in. "Is it important?" "We've got a busy day. It won't take long." I sat at the edge of the living room, the place that once felt like part of my home. Now it smelled of expensive candles and detergent, artificial and cold. Jason came down the stairs, stretching. "What's up, Ma?" I held the jar between my hands. "I heard about the plans. The guest house," I said softly. I wanted to ask if we could preserve part of the garden. Maybe the corner with the marigolds. That was your father's favorite spot." Jason looked at Angela, then back at me. "Mom, you've had that space for years," he said. "We've been more than accommodating. You're not paying rent. You're not helping with the mortgage. Angela and I are trying to make this a real home, one that reflects us." "I'm not trying to be in the way," I said gently. "Just that little corner. It means something." Angela scoffed. "This again?" Jason raised a hand, cutting her off. "Look, it's not about the garden, Ma. It's about fairness. You've been living here for free, using the utilities, taking up space, and you're not contributing." My heart stung at the word. "Not contributing." Angela stepped forward. "And let's be honest," she said, arms crossed. "You're a freeloader. I'm sorry, but someone has to say it. It's not sustainable. We're not a charity." I blinked. That word, freeloader, as if everything I'd poured into their lives, the land, the home, the years, had vanished. Jason added, "Angela's been doing research. There are some decent state-run homes in the area. They're clean, and they've got like music nights and group meals. It might be better for you." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. "You want me to leave?" Jason sighed. "We just think it's time for a change. You're getting older, Mom. You deserve to be cared for. Let the state take care of you." There it was. Let the state take care of you. The final nail. Spoken not with cruelty, but with the bland, thoughtless practicality of someone who has already made up his mind. Angela nodded, pleased. I looked at them both. Angela in her crisp blouse, eyes sharp and triumphant. Jason, my son, avoiding my gaze now, pretending to be busy with his phone again. I stood slowly, placing the jar on the table. "I understand," I said. Angela blinked. "That's it?" Jason looked up, surprised. "Really?" I nodded. "You're right. You deserve the space." Without another word, I walked back through the door, down the paved path, past the flower beds I once planted, with Jason as a boy. The marigolds were in full bloom, their scent earthy and warm, drifted in the breeze like a memory. I paused in front of my garden. I had never thought of myself as someone who could be erased. I thought roots mattered, that time mattered, but people forget. They forget what you gave, what you grew, what you were. They forget that quiet isn't weakness, that silence isn't surrender. That evening, I sat alone in my cottage, the deed to the land resting in my lap like a stone. It was time, not to fight, but to move, and to remind them, gently, firmly, just whose land they were standing on. It was 3:04 a.m. when I unzipped the old canvas suitcase from the top shelf of my closet. The air was still, heavy with summer humidity, the kind that made silence feel suffocating. My hands didn't tremble, my thoughts were clear. I folded my sweaters slowly, one by one. The maroon one with the frayed cuffs, the gray cardigan with missing buttons. My fingers lingered on a pale blue blouse, the one I wore when Jason graduated high school. He had wrapped his arms around me that day, his tassel brushing against my cheek, and whispered, "We did it, Mom." I placed it gently on top of the others. In the side pocket, I tucked away the photograph of Jason as a toddler, sitting in a bucket of soapy water in the backyard, covered in bubbles, grinning with his 2 front teeth missing. It had been tucked into my mirror frame for 20 years. Now it came with me. Next to it, I slid in a velvet pouch with the gold chain my husband gave me on our 15th anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years. The clasp was broken, but I couldn't leave it behind. Some things deserve to be carried, even if they no longer shine. When the bag was packed, I sat at the small wooden table where I used to shell peas and drink evening tea. I pulled out a notepad and a pen and wrote just one sentence. "Jason, my dear son, I never wanted to be a burden. I'm going now. Not out of shame, but peace. You take care. Mom." No anger, no guilt, just the quiet truth. I folded the note once, then slipped it beneath the salt shaker on my kitchen counter, a place he wouldn't miss. At 3:41 a.m., I locked the door behind me. The moonlight spilled across the garden, glinting off the morning dew like silver tears. I walked past the marigolds. I did not cry. I did not look back. I walked out to the main road where a cab waited. I had called it earlier from the landline, using the name Mrs. Elkins, an old habit from my teaching days when I'd use a fake name for privacy. As the cab pulled away, I turned once to see the silhouettes of the two homes behind me. Mine, warm and small. Theirs, tall and well lit, with outdoor string lights still glowing faintly from last weekend's party. The homes sat side by side like mother and child, but one had outgrown the other. Or so it thought. I arrived at a modest hotel near the city by dawn, checked in under my maiden name, and sat at the small desk in the room with the deed spread out before me. My name, my legal name, was printed on every page. Clear, undeniable. I ran my fingers across the signature line I'd never crossed out. All these years, I'd left it untouched. I had never formally gifted the land, never transferred ownership. Jason had assumed. They had all assumed. But assumptions are not contracts. At 8:03 a.m., I called Paul Benedetti, my late husband's oldest friend and former law partner. He hadn't heard from me in years, but when he picked up the phone, his voice softened instantly. "Margaret?" he said, nearly whispering. "Is that really you?" "It's me, Paul," I replied. "I need your help. Today." An hour later, we met at his downtown office. He looked older, of course, but his handshake was still firm. His office smelled like pine wood and strong coffee. "I never thought I'd hear from you again," he said, eyes scanning the document I handed him. "But I'm glad you called. I want to sell the land," I said simply. He blinked. "All of it, all of it." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "I assume this isn't a casual decision. I assume you know me better than that." He smiled faintly. "Indeed I do." We worked through the morning, verifying records, checking boundaries, confirming there were no liens or disputes. By noon, Paul had made a few calls to trusted contacts in real estate. "There's a development firm looking to build a high-end complex in that area," he told me. "They've been trying to acquire parcels nearby for months. Your land would complete the square they need. They'll pay, and they'll pay fast." My fingers curled slightly. "Missed? How fast?" "Contract signed today. Funds in escrow by Friday. Demolition rights included." "It's generous, Margaret. Very generous." I sat very still. I thought of Angela's voice. That old granny hut's coming down. I thought of Jason's. "Let the state take care of you." I thought of the marigolds. And then I nodded. "Let's do it." By 2:17 p.m., I had signed the documents. The land was sold. Every inch. From the rose beds to the tool shed. From the fire pit Angela installed without asking, to the pool Jason bragged about to his friends. From their 2-story dream home to the little wooden cottage I had once called sanctuary. Sold. The representative from the development firm, a young woman in her 30s, extended her hand to shake mine. "Congratulations, Mrs. Green," she said. "We'll begin demolition prep next week." "Of course," I said calmly. "Please, let me know if they resist. I have the original deed." He smiles as he opens the door to me. "They say we want a boy, but nobody wants one. So you have your boy." I smiled. Not anymore. That night, I returned to the hotel, placed my suitcase by the door, and stood by the window overlooking the city. The lights blinked like stars fallen to earth. I poured myself a cup of hotel tea, bitter, too strong, and lifted it in silence. To peace, to land, to the quiet kind of justice that doesn't scream but is heard all the same. It started with a letter taped to their front door, a plain white envelope delivered by hand, sealed with the gold insignia of a development firm. Inside, a notice of property transfer, a demolition schedule, and a final warning to vacate all structures within 5 business days. Angela found it first. She screamed. Jason thought she was joking, some prank, some mistake. He yanked the papers from her hand, scanned them once, twice, 3 times, then turned pale. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "This can't be right." Angela tore through the house, searching for the deed, the contract, any proof that the land was theirs. But she came up empty. Jason called the county office, then the assessor, then the registrar. Each time the same answer. "The land is no longer under your name. It was never under your name. Title records confirm original ownership belonged to Margaret Green. Sale completed and finalized last Friday. Jason's voice cracked. But she never. I mean, that's impossible. It's ours. We live here. I'm sorry, sir, the clerk replied. According to our records, you were tenants. Informal, but without a legal claim. You'll need to vacate. Angela collapsed into the kitchen chair, hands clutching her temples. You said it was ours, she hissed. Jason stood frozen in the middle of the room, the notice dangling from his fingers. She never signed it over, he whispered. What? She never transferred the deed. She gave me permission to build, but she never gave me the land. Angela's face twisted. You mean to tell me we spent $200,000 remodeling a house we don't even own? Jason didn't answer. He didn't have to. Angela stood up so fast her chair toppled. You're unbelievable. You said she gave it to you. You said it was understood. God, Jason, how do you not check these things? I didn't think I had to, he shouted, finally snapping. She's my mother. Angela laughed, bitter and sharp. Yeah? Well, your mother just sold the ground out from under us. That night, they called me 9 times. 10, 11. I watched the phone ring from the window of my new apartment, a 10th floor unit overlooking Central Park. The view was nothing like my garden, but it had a strange kind of peace, the kind that only comes after a storm. I let it ring. The next morning, the bulldozers came, bright yellow, like school buses with jaws. The sound of engines filled the air, along with the crunch of gravel and the hum of men in hard hats reading blueprints. Angela ran outside in her robe, mascara smeared across her cheeks. You can't do this, she shrieked at the crew leader. We live here. He checked his clipboard, unbothered. Ma'am, according to the paperwork, you have until noon to remove your belongings. Jason stumbled out behind her, shirtless, barefoot, holding his laptop like a child clutches a toy in a fire. The neighbors peeked through blinds. A few came out, murmuring in disbelief. Angela stormed up to one of the workers. This is illegal. My husband owns this house. The man raised an eyebrow. He built a house on land he doesn't own. That's not illegal. That's unfortunate. Jason stood there, chest heaving, staring at the machines. One revved its engine and began tearing through the side fence, the one he put up with his own hands just 2 summers ago. He grabbed his phone again, dialed. I let it ring. By noon, the garden was gone. By 1 p.m., the guest house foundation, still incomplete, was torn up like paper. By 2:30, the first corner of their home came down. Angela screamed the moment wood cracked, and Jason just stood there, holding her like a man who'd seen something die that he'd never properly valued until it was too late. They left that evening in a borrowed pickup truck, clothes and electronics shoved hastily into plastic bins. The workers paused briefly to let them back out of the driveway, what was left of it, before resuming their task. Behind them, their dream home stood gutted, its insides exposed to sky. And I received one final voicemail that night. Jason's voice was hoarse. Mom, please, please call me. We didn't know. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Please. He trailed off. I saved the message, but I didn't call back. Not yet. It took 3 days for the demolition to finish. The house, their house, came down plank by plank, beam by beam. The pool was drained, shattered, and jackhammered into rubble. The guest house frame splintered like matchsticks. Even the stone walkway Angela had paid too much for was torn up and loaded into a dump truck. Nothing was spared. Each day, I received photos from the construction company, per my request. I didn't ask for them out of malice. I asked so I could bear witness, not to the destruction, but to the truth finally surfacing. The neighbors didn't know where to look. Some gawked from across their yards. Some whispered behind closed doors. Everyone knew Jason and Angela. Everyone had seen the parties, the new furniture, the way they bragged about their renovation plans. And now, they watched a bulldozer scoop up pieces of that life like garbage. Angela refused to leave the property on the first day. She stood on the sidewalk, screaming at the construction crew. This is a mistake. You can't do this. I live here. But the men had their orders. The papers were legal, the signatures authentic, the schedule tight. On the second day, she stopped screaming and started crying. Jason came to find me. I was sitting in the courtyard of my apartment building, watering a small pot of herbs I had started. Rosemary, of course. The city didn't offer soil like my garden did, but life can grow in unlikely places. He looked thinner, tired, lost. Mom, he said, voice cracking. We didn't know. I didn't say anything. She never meant it like that, he insisted. Angela, she says things, but I didn't mean to. Mom, please, just cancel the contract or postpone it. Give us time. He sounded like a child again, the same tone he used when he broke a window and tried to hide it, when he lost his backpack before finals, when he failed to call me for Mother's Day and tried to make it up with flowers from a gas station. I looked at him, then I stood, walked inside, and returned a moment later with an envelope. Inside, a copy of the purchase agreement, stamped, notarized, binding. Jason took it with shaking hands, read the first few lines. Is this your signature? Yes, I said. He blinked, tears brimming. You sold it all? Yes? He looked at me like I was a stranger. Angela came the next morning, not in heels, not in makeup. She wore an old hoodie and sweatpants, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked like someone who had run out of control and didn't know where to aim her fury anymore. She didn't knock on my door. She knelt on the sidewalk outside my building, knees on concrete, head lowered. I saw her through the window, hunched and trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. Please, just give us another chance. I stepped outside. Slowly, she didn't look up. I'll do anything, she said. I'll fix it. I'll make Jason apologize. Just please don't let them destroy what's left. That house is our life. I stood there a long moment, the early morning air cool around us. Then I reached into my purse and handed her the same envelope. Your husband already saw this, I said gently. It's done. She looked up at me, and for the first time her eyes were not sharp or condescending, just hollow. How could you? I gave you the land, I said. The home, the garden. I gave you my silence, and you used it all up. She closed her eyes. We didn't think you'd ever. You didn't think I could. Angela stood slowly. Her knees were red from the pavement. She took the envelope without another word, and just like that, she walked away. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her. I simply remembered everything she thought I'd forget. The view from the 10th floor is nothing like my old garden, but it has its charm. From my window, I can see the city stretched out in all directions, lights twinkling like stars that decided they preferred concrete to sky. Cars hum below like a gentle tide, and the air up here smells less of soil and more of possibility. My apartment is small but elegant. Hardwood floors, granite counters, a wide glass wall that frames the skyline like a painting. There's a tiny balcony where I've planted mint in a ceramic pot, not quite the same as the rows of vegetables I used to tend, but it grows well under the sun. Strong, persistent, just like me. I sip my tea slowly, hot, earthy, steeped with lemon and a sprig of that balcony mint. It calms me. It reminds me that life, no matter how bruised or twisted, always finds a way to taste sweet again. The phone buzzes on the counter beside me. Jason, again. His name lights up the screen like it's reaching for something that's already drifted too far. I don't move. I let it ring. He's been calling for days. The messages started polite, then urgent, then broken. Mom, please. We're staying at a friend's. Just talk to me. Angela wants to apologize. She didn't mean what she said. We didn't know it was that serious. We didn't think you'd actually. I'm sorry. I believe that part, that he's sorry. But sorrow doesn't rebuild gardens. It doesn't erase words like freeloader or nights spent thinking you're invisible in your own home. It doesn't return the kind of dignity you're forced to reclaim in silence. I lift the phone, glance at the screen. His name glows for a moment. Then I press the side button. The screen goes dark. I don't hate him, but I no longer make space in my heart for people who can't tell the difference between kindness. I didn't destroy his home. He built it on borrowed ground and forgot to ask who was holding the deed. Now he remembers. Outside my window, the city pulses with life. People moving, loving, lying, regretting. The world turns, regardless of whose house falls and whose heart hardens. I sip my tea again. It tastes stronger today. They say, revenge is a dish best served cold. But this is not revenge. It's restoration. It's the quiet rebalancing of scales left tilted too long. I breathe in deeply, the scent of mint curling through the air. I didn't lose a son. I lost the illusion that he ever really saw me. And maybe that's the most honest grief of all. But it's also freeing, because now I see myself. I see what I've built, what I've endured, and what I've reclaimed. Not with shouting, not with spite, but with quiet steps and signed papers and the strength to walk away. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or quietly erased, let me say this. You're not weak for staying silent. You're wise for waiting. And when your time comes, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll just need to rise. If you've been quiet for too long, let me tell your story. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here, silence is a form of intelligence, and revenge, it doesn't need noise to make its point.